I was born in 1974. I started out life as a stereotypical tomboy. I loved cars. I was obsessed with the garbage truck. I enjoyed being physical. I liked competing with boys, and I didn't worry at all about appearance. I was confident and knew my voice. I spoke up constantly about injustices my older sisters perpetrated on me. I spoke up about bumps in my socks and uncomfortable underwear, and food. Gender stereotypes held no sway on me as a young child. But like many girls, something began to change around the age of 10. All of a sudden, I felt the need to pay attention to gender stereotypes in order to fit in socially. I made a conscious choice to try and strike a balance between gender worlds, frankly, because I felt that girls didn't have as much fun as boys. As time went on, I realized that society wanted me to stick closer to the comfortable roles assigned to girls. And as luck would have it, my genuine interest in dance, gymnastics, and cheerleading fit a mold of what girls should be interested in. I still felt like I was being true to me, even if it meant subjecting myself to the endless primping that came with being female. You see, I'd been born into a post-women's movement world, where in theory, women had options like never before. My path would be up to me and not determined by the patriarchy. My entire generation, Gen X, would usher in the substantive change that our mothers had worked hard to make happen. Except none of that really happened as planned or envisioned by my mom's generation. I've long been curious about what happened with my generation, a generation that should have capitalized on the promise of the late 1970s and early 80s feminist movement. It wasn't until my 21-year-old niece, Emily, told me with absolute clarity and resolve that she was keenly aware that this era in our history was rare in its openness to female empowerment that it struck me. It took two, really almost three generations for the women's movement of the 70s and early 80s to result in women feeling empowered. And that's even a bold assertion. We still have a ways to go. With the complexity of gender being the backdrop, I wanted to explore a generational view on finding one's voice as a woman. I wanted to understand how my mom navigated this in her generation, the boomer generation, and I wanted to delve more into how my niece navigated finding her voice in her generation. The concept of voice kept feeling important. Enter Rebecca Solnit. Full disclosure, I have my mom to thank for introducing me to Rebecca Solnit. Rebecca Solnit is a feminist writer and is famous for coining the now ubiquitous term mansplaining. Solnit is unapologetic in the best of ways, and like me, she is also curious about women's voices. I lean on Rebecca Solnit's definition of voice to describe what it is I'm trying to get at. She describes it this way. By voice, I don't mean only literal voice, the sound produced by the vocal cords in the ears of others, but the ability to speak up, to participate, to experience oneself and be experienced as a free person with rights. Here's something I've learned about finding one's voice. It's an evolution. It's not linear, and it really is a process that has to be unique to each individual. To understand how that might look, let me introduce you to my niece, Emily. Unlike me, Emily came into this world with a love of all things stereotypically girly and feminine. I remember her going through a lengthy phase of wearing tutus every day. She simply adored the femininity associated with them. But here's the thing, Emily always had a feisty side that leaned into speaking up for herself and those she loved. With all her girly traits, she mixed in a healthy dose of stereotypically strong male energy. When I interviewed Emily for this project, she expressed that her journey to finding her voice involved unpacking her reality of growing up in a matriarchy and then realizing that the world is in fact built on a patriarchy. You see, Emily's childhood was filled with women. My family is a family of girls. I am one of 4 girls, and my parents separated when I was 8 years old. My mom never remarried, so it was a female-dominated household. The men that came into the picture had to accept this reality. Emily is right. In our family, it's the women who are in charge. There's no doubt that these early impressions of females being strong, capable, funny, and having a voice gave Emily a sense that it was her birthright to find her own authentic voice. But it wasn't until she began reading about feminism in high school through social media that she really had language to express her thoughts. Despite her love of all things girly, Emily realized her voice could be used to advance the progress of women. She quickly understood that she had to find a community where her voice could not only be understood but emboldened. For Emily, that meant leaving our relatively conservative Southern California hometown for the University of California at Santa Cruz, a place known for its feminist theory prowess. Emily is now in her senior year at UC Santa Cruz and will end up graduating as a triple major with BAs in legal studies, feminist theory, and psychology. She is in the process of applying to law schools because she knows that her purpose is to find ways to empower women through policy and law. She told me that she is unapologetically ambitious, and she knows that generations of women before her were not fortunate enough to live in an era where it was okay to be unapologetically ambitious. Emily also refuses to apologize for embracing her feminine qualities. Though there was a time where she felt as though she needed to change that aspect of her identity, she now understands that her voice needs to be authentic to herself and to not adhere to anyone else's perception of who she should be or how she should show up. She knows she is the recipient of freedoms fought for in her grandmother's generation. Which brings me to my mom, Emily's grandmother. My mom was born in 1946, which is precisely the beginning of the baby boomer generation. She grew up in a time that saw massive social change for both women and people of color. Her identity was very much shaped on gender-biased notions that women were mainly to focus on being attractive, that their value was in their beauty, not in what they had to say. My mom's journey to finding her voice saw her enter and exit a marriage that was not really a love match as much as it was a nod to tradition and security. My mom's journey to find her voice also involved years of battling back from depression and trauma suffered at the hands of an abusive father. Though she relied on her beauty to carve out a life, she always had an innately rebellious spirit. And when I interviewed her, she realized that her first moment of truly finding her voice was when she stood up to her father as he was abusing her mother. Years of hard work have helped my mother land in a place that feels authentic to her true voice. She is retired from teaching and counseling and spends her days reading and fighting for social justice and the climate. The days of relying solely on her beauty as her voice are long gone. Her voice as an activist is still evolving, but she is unrelenting in figuring it out. After interviewing both my mother and my niece for this project, I can see a thread that runs through the generations of women in my family. It's a thread that is deeply moving to me. It's a thread that shows up as relentless survivors, unwilling to not be heard or experienced for who we really are as women. We stumble at times, we retreat, we wrestle with the trade-offs of beauty versus substance. But all of us fight to find our voices, to find our community that will support us in finding our voices. What is there that I can impart upon anyone hearing this message? I would like you to realize that finding your voice is life force for women. Finding your voice takes guts, and it takes effort, and it certainly takes time. I would also encourage you to talk to the women in your world who you know are on that same journey. Nurture their journey. Stand in solidarity with them. It's easier than ever to be female in the United States, but there's no way it can be described as outright easy. Emily made me realize the reality of things when I spoke to her. She clearly sees how much progress has been made by women. She understands how hard the fight is, and she also understands that her generation has an opportunity to take the women's movement to new heights. I'm going to take her advice and be unapologetic about who I am and how I show up. It is time for all of us women to take Emily's advice. #unapologetic, #my voice, #her voice, #voice matters.